a 3, and we are officially live. What's going on, fellas?
Yo, yo, yo. Nothing much, man. Another Monday, another Layer1Live.
Another day, another dollar.
Yeah, exactly. Wasn't as crazy as last week from a news standpoint, but we definitely got a lot of good info to go over today.
Yeah, definitely. For the people that were here last time, and for the people listening on audio, we had an issue with COVID tags, and it looks like we're going to try this again, but we didn't come up on dashboard. Dimitri's desk wasn't coming up on dashboard. It's like we're getting shadow banned from YouTube, at least from the front page. So if you guys have issues finding us, that is the reason. But we're going to see how it works this time, and, you know, we're gonna have a good episode here, fellas. So, what's going on? How are you guys dealing with the COVID crisis where you may be? Dimitri's in New Jersey, Mike's in Pittsburgh, dealing with some flooding. I saw on Snapchat. Yeah. How are your weeks going?
Going good. You know, just still, what is it, 2.5 weeks now of self-quarantining kind of deal. So, you know, going through. Obviously, we just saw Trump talk about how he's moving back the social distancing or self-quarantine or whatever it is until April 30th. So, I feel like that was one of those things where everybody knew it was coming. But now that it's real, it's like, damn, you know, another month, another 4 weeks on top of 2 to 4 weeks, depending on kind of where you're at. Obviously, Deem is kind of in the heart of it there in Jersey.
Yep. He fled to the heart of it.
I'm not sure Pittsburgh's going to let him back in. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm coming over, man, so we can do this podcast live with you, soon. So I'll bring some toilet paper.
We've got some guys filling in the chat here. It looks like Scott's in the chat, Kieran's in the chat, the OGs as they will be so forth called. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the discussion. We have a bunch of things to get to today. We're going to get to the stats really quick, but you guys can notice if you're watching on YouTube, we put like a little, what would you even call it? We put like a column there with the various things that we're talking about. It's not exactly lined up correctly, so we're going to continue to clean that up, but it's just for you guys watching. You can kind of click through and see where we're talking about. Right now, we're going to have breaking, we're going to have discussion, so that's where you see the B and D. And then you have Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS. Those are going to be the topics of discussion. Eventually, we'll add, Tezos, we'll add Binance and all these things. But just so people can click in, because everyone's been giving me hell about timestamps, man. They've been killing me on the timestamps.
This is great, man. We should screenshot the dashboard now, and then like in 10 years, whenever Layer One's the biggest crypto podcast, people look back on this dashboard like they look back on the first Amazon site.
It's like the unbalanced images. Like, all right. Well, we do have a bunch to get to. We had some breaking news, and then we didn't have breaking news, so we're not gonna touch on that. Some team news. Apparently, the CryptoKitty already has a name. His name is Bungaloo Strimbaloo. Unfortunately, that name sucks ass, but it literally is the name. Like, on the blockchain, that is his name. I cannot change it, so we're gonna go ahead. Have you named the Bitcoin man yet? I see him there in the corner.
Yeah, I read the instructions, which basically means I just kind of glanced at them. I didn't really actually read through them for the Bitcoin man, and saw the same thing. So I didn't want to break the news to you that yours probably had a name already. But yeah, I'm sure mine is something goofy as well. Maybe we can hit up CZ and reverse the blocks or something. Hold back the name.
Set the rollback.
Rollback, yeah.
Cool. Well, let's get to. Do we have anything else before we get to breaking news, and then we'll hit discussion?
I don't think so. I mean, somebody, a good friend or colleague of ours, kind of dropped us some interesting news about Binance and another party, which is going to be hitting real soon, and then was kind of, was kind of pulling back on that. So we don't want to be the ones breaking it. Appreciate him dropping that info. We'll let him in that company break it, but stay tuned for some interesting news on Binance. They seem to continually be struggling from a PR standpoint, and this is no different. So anyway, yeah, we can jump into quick news here if you want.
Yeah, let's do that, man. Let's do it. I like that jersey you're wearing today.
Thank you, man. This is the classic This is the classic McCutcheon San Fran jersey. So
I remember, yeah.
That's a good ICO alert story we should get to one of these days too, about kind of the Pittsburgh Pirates fallout and McCutcheon getting traded and all this. But anyway, you guys don't want to hear about that. You definitely want to hear about the continued destruction of Bitcoin SV, which, as we know, is one of the bastard childs of Bitcoin. Essentially, over the last few weeks, it seems like there's been some changes that have been going on with Bitcoin SV, and now, as of this past week, a random anonymous miner has come in and taken over the network hash rate, essentially, or hash power. So over 51%, obviously allowing for the possibility of a 51% attack, meaning, of course, they can block transactions or revert blocks or whatever the case may be. So some kind of craziness going on with Bitcoin SV. There was some weird fee changes that were happening as well with Calvin Air and a large Canadian-based mining company called TAAL. Not a ton of info on that, but in the Decrypt article, they reference that a little bit. So it sounds to me like behind the scenes, classic Calvin Air and his henchmen are kind of changing things up so that they can, I would imagine, profit even in a bear market. And now perhaps some random anonymous miners are trying to exploit that. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. But it does kind of sound like impending chaos for Bitcoin SV.
So is it bullish or bearish?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with bearish on that one. I'm wearing my I was wearing my bear hat today. I switched, but
Gotcha.
Yeah, does the market switch with the hat, or what's going on? Do you switch the hat with the market, or what's going on?
After I bought the hat, and then less than 24 hours later, we dumped to $3,800. It's like a weird curse now. Yeah.
Gotcha. Hey, I forgot to hit this before Dimitri hits his quick news, but we have a top 5 countries. We have U.S., we have Australia, Germany, UK, Canada. Top 3 episodes of the past week. We had the guys from Terraform Capital, we had the Block, and we had Sutler Ventures Product Capital with Mike. We have upcoming guests this week. We have a full kind of slate here. We have 401 Orchid. They're kind of doing a crypto-based VPN service. We have Maple Leaf Capital at the end of the week. That's going to be a great episode. We have the Sandbox next week, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then we have TBA for the end of next week. But that's going to be the stats from this week. Dimitri, sorry for getting in your way there.
Boom. All right. So yeah, the next piece of news we've got here is Binance basically introduced the widget for Brave browser. Now, in our industry, a lot of people love Brave browser, obviously, for all the things that it does. So they introduced this widget, which makes it easy for people basically to buy, and sell cryptocurrency. And they added pretty much the major ones. So you have the Bitcoin, Ethereum, I believe the XRP is in there too. I think it's the top 5. Oh, BNB's in there, obviously. So yeah, it's great. It's just an easier tool to buy and sell cryptocurrencies through a widget, where it's very seamless, and easy to use. And just keep in mind, Brave browser has, over 12 million active users, monthly users. So, that's pretty good stuff there. And, it's good for Binance because, that's more volume for them.
Absolutely. Right. I'm going to fly through these next 2 ones. I've got the Solana token sale. So we had them as kind of a feature story on our last Layer1Live, but Solana ended up doing that token sale. They raised $1.8 million at a valuation of 110 million. So that puts it at about 22 cents per token. So that is actually below the last 2 private rounds. I think it says here the last 2 private rounds were 22.5 per token in July 2019 and 25 cents last month. So this actually is below the other sales. So based on that, this article is from Masari. They just analysis there. They think that that's going to lead private investors to not do a quick flip. Obviously, they're going to probably stake their tokens, hopefully get a yield, and then later on we'll see what that does to the selling pressure. But yeah, that's a Dutch auction that happened last week. Good to see projects still raising money, and at this point Solana's raised up to $26 million for their smart contract platform. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, and we'll get to Telegram. Any thoughts, Solana?
I was hoping we'd get our COVID-19 stimulus check. Could throw it in, throw it in the Solana. No, not really.
Gotta file those taxes first.
Yeah, for sure. Congrats to Solana there. You know, they've raised a ton of money, and we're excited to see how things go. On a obviously longer term kind of network here, with quite a longer career, Zcash is introducing a new upgrade called Heartwood, which is basically going to enable Zcash to run various interoperability efforts, cross-chain integration, and a variety of other light client use cases. We don't talk a ton about Zcash. You know, they're obviously a privacy coin, very heated kind of battle between them and Monero in a lot of ways. But, you know, interesting to see as Monero has had some privacy upgrades come through and general upgrades come through, Zcash is doing the same. So we'll be interested to see how that goes for them. Binance, on the positive side for Binance, they are launching a crypto debit card. So I think it was last week we talked about this with the Coinbase debit card. You know, Coinbase has had a debit card for some time, I think since all the way back to maybe 2014 or 2015, under a variety of names. It used to be available in the US, now is mostly available in Europe and other major countries outside of the US. I would guess that's how Binance's crypto Visa debit card will work as well. So if you're in the US, you know, don't get your hopes up too much on that front. And then finally, in another twist to the Block versus Binance debate around whether or not Binance's offices in China got raided, now Binance is opening an office in China officially under Binance Academy. So they are actually opening a physical location in Shanghai. Again, it's under Binance Academy, not necessarily under the exchange. Binance Academy being, you know, the kind of educational unit of Binance. So some interesting news there from Binance. Sticking in the East a bit here, the final piece of quick news before we get into discussion is Neo. So Neo, another kind of longer standing crypto project, unlike Zcash, seems to be headed the other way. Bitcoinist reported that they unlocked about $11 million worth of tokens, which is about 1.6 million tokens that moved from what you would call the foundation's locked account to the foundation's unlocked account. So, you know, obviously various projects have vesting periods for the foundation or for the developers. And while the tokens have obviously not been sold yet, they haven't been transferred to an exchange, you know, it's hard to imagine why they would unlock the tokens, if not to just sell them. So, you know, kind of a tsunami out there on the horizon, is what Bitcoinist is saying for the Neo markets. But, you know, if it's only $11 million and you look at the volume on Neo, they have like $400 million in 24-hour volume. I'm not sure how much 11 mil is gonna do, assuming that the books are pretty stacked based on that volume. But who knows? So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, last point to make, because we did have that story there. Telegram appealed, or is in the process of appealing their ban to distribute their Gram tokens. So any of you accredited investors out there that got into the Telegram token sale for whatever reason, you can hopefully take solace that they are appealing the ruling from the U.S. It was district court. I'm not. Let me see what court. This is on Yahoo Sports.
Yeah, it was a strange. Yahoo's all over
the
place.
U.S. District Judge P. Kevin Castle of the Southern District of New York. So it's a New York District Court. They ruled, obviously, that Telegram could not distribute their Gram tokens to the investors that were in New York City, I'm assuming. But they are appealing that for United States investors. So hopefully you guys can get your tokens at some point in the near future.
Yeah. All you, Dean, when you get in your tokens, I know there was $1 million minimum. So you probably bought like what, 10x that?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Hopefully soon. I'm trying to buy this new Lambo.
Yeah.
Hey, for you guys that are out there in the chat, please leave comments. Let us know what you want to talk about. We're getting into discussion here. Like I said, we got Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS, Tezos, Ripple, and Binance, as well as the discussion piece that we're going to come up to soon. But if you want to hear us talk about anything else, please leave that in the comments. We want to hear from you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Deem, we talked a little bit about this over the weekend, I think it was, but what's going on with kind of this like digital dollar rumoration and whatnot, or rumors that are kind of going around.
Yeah. So the Senate is basically teases, the crypto community and everybody about this digital dollar. We know that countries have been working on this in the background for a while now, and due to the circumstances that we have right now with the global slowdown and the stimulus that needs to be delivered to people, they're trying to fast track this and deploy this in the US, which is what they call a digital dollar. And the idea behind it is, it will facilitate the distribution of some of the stimulus package that people need to get the money. Because in the US, they're just like other countries as well. I'm pretty sure there's issues where the people don't have access to banking, there's those that don't have access to banking, and there's those that are underbanked, or what's called, right? So there's struggles in terms of distributing money to that population of people, which is actually tends to be like close to like 20%. So if you have difficulties distributing that capital to those people, and they really need it actually, then that stimulus package is not going to be as effective. Also, the ledger that's going to be used in tracking that they will implement with the digital dollar will help the Fed, I guess, to basically track the spending of for the people. So like to see exactly where things are kind of going, and they can track that easily, because right now, obviously, we have banks, and they would need like some kind of an order, right, to get your information on to see your capital flow. But with the digital dollar, it'll give an opportunity for the government to basically monitor where kind of money is going, and make sure that it goes in the right places. So they're talking about like having banks set up these digital wallets basically for digital dollar. So they're working on that. The interesting part that's that's we need to kind of think about is how is that going to be distributed to those that are like not banked, right? So like if those that are underbanked or don't have a bank account, how are you going to get them to to use this digital wallet, right?
Right. And then you obviously have a whole like technological piece there, right? So I mean, there's a lot of needed education around
right
how to kind of go through and use that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, for the time being, I think this is the time for governments to digitize their currency, because I think the headline came out today about France as well, trying to push like for ECB to do this the digital euro. In theory, what it should provide is a faster way to deploy capital straight to people or specific sectors in a time of need, because right now there's really no efficient way of doing it. Like, what are you going to mail checks right to everybody?
That's literally what they're going to do too.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuts.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's just addressing the efficiency thing. There is a lot of rumors and things where this could actually kind of like nationalize banks, because the Fed would take control, bypass the banks, and basically the interest rate decisions and so on that would happen on a bigger level would impact the people directly more, rather than it is right now, because right now the interest rates go through the banks and that trickles down to the consumer and the people. But they're saying if this digital dollar is going to be connected straight to the Fed, then the Fed and the actual person who uses that monetary value will have closer direct link to the interest rates and how that will affect the money. So that's there's a lot of speculation around it. There's a lot of how it's going to perform.
A lot of pros and cons for sure. There's a ton to unpack there. I mean, the other piece, like you kind of said, that I think a lot of people don't realize yet, maybe those that are outside of crypto, is all of the privacy concerns that come with the digital dollar, right? So yeah, there are benefits. You can get money to people a lot easier in times of crisis, obviously super important. it will basically, in times of non-crisis, allow the Fed to more easily control monetary policy because they don't have to kind of play this telephone game with funds down to the end consumer, the end purchaser. But what all that means is that now there's kind of this database that's flowing and easily tracking where all of these dollars are being spent. And if you can, if you eliminate cash and everybody moves to a digital dollar, and you now have the ability to kind of turn people on or turn people off to their bank accounts and give them no other alternative, that's where obviously most people in the crypto space start to get a little scared, right? And kind of say, hey, this is not right. This is too authoritarian. This is why Bitcoin's been created, right, as the alternative. And I'm sure as the digitization of fiat currencies continues, we'll see more and more of that push from crypto.
Yeah, the conversations in the Layer 1 Telegram have been really awesome lately. I feel like we've been having some like interesting topics brought up and discussions following through. But we had Pete in the chat the other day answering my question that I threw out to the group and on Twitter, which was, how does the dollar that we currently have look when it comes to digitizing it? Like, we have this digital dollar now. What is the difference between them saying, okay, we're going to create this digital dollar? From a user perspective, our dollars are already digital. Now there's a ton of other implications that you guys just talked about. So how, from a user's perspective, is the dollar that we have now going to look significantly different when it becomes the digital dollar that they're talking about in Congress?
It's a good question. I would guess that, like anything, any sort of digital dollar bill as well is going to come with a ton of other kind of accoutrements of sorts within that bill. There's going to be a whole lot there that they want to pass in secret alongside the digital dollar, some of which won't pertain to the actual digital dollar, but a lot of which will. So whenever the 1,200 page bill comes out about the digital dollar here in the coming months or years, as I'm sure it will, I would say check those kind of contextual pieces, and that will really say, hey, this is a lot of the ways that the digital dollar is going to kind of change things for people. Because you're right. I mean, obviously, most people use credit. Very few people use debit cards. I think most people just use credit cards, and then at the end of the month, they transfer money from their bank to the credit card company and pay it off. So maybe we don't see too much of a change with the digital dollar. Maybe everything is just on the back end with the Fed and the government, and things kind of continue as is, other than obviously the stimulus coming out.
Yeah. Pete's answer, I guess, was the fact that the government would have more control of what you're doing, right? Like they would,
Right.
like to Dimitri's point, I think he was really in parallel with what you were just saying, Dimitri, where they would be able to directly maybe apply tax processes to the dollar, right? Instead of like going through a process, they could literally do that automatically before you receive it on like a more direct level. I think they could control the dollar a little bit more. Like, let's say you get into, maybe you're accused of murder, or maybe you're accused of manslaughter, maybe you didn't do it, but they could freeze your funds almost instantaneously, as opposed to going through the process where and what is the process now? They would talk to your bank and get your funds frozen. Is that, and what's the process of getting that done as far as the timeline? Because that seems like it would take a little bit of a time, but when you have a digital dollar, you'd be able to literally almost instantaneously freeze your funds.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, there's one more thing I want to mention about. So in regards to the control, for sure for the dollar, but damn, it just slipped up my mind. Sorry.
Need more of that alpha brain, bro.
Yeah, man. It's all right. It'll come back to me.
It's basically like at the actual dollar level, at the digital dollar level versus the on ramps. You know what I mean? I mean, it's the equivalent of Coinbase being able to shut down your account so that you can't buy or sell Bitcoin anymore. You can still hold Bitcoin, but imagine if then Coinbase or the government could shut down your actual holding of Bitcoin in a cold wallet.
It's a good analogy.
Right? So it's a big jump.
I wonder how the digital dollar is going to work in regards to being able to actually use an ATM and withdraw physical dollar. So I think that's a big, question that kind of needs to be answered. How that's going to be rolled out. But like Mike said, we need to wait for that white paper to, from the Fed, to explain all these things, because if you have a digital dollar and it can be extracted from an ATM as cash, then like that kind of undermines the whole purpose, right, of kind of digital dollar control wallet, and all that stuff.
And
So
I think that's a fair question, because what you'll see is not a majority of the population, but some part of the population will flee into actual physical cash if they feel this pressure from the government. So that's a great question. Yeah.
It'll be interesting. We'll obviously keep you guys posted on that front. I feel like it's going to be one of those things that you hear a little bit about, a little more about, and then all of a sudden it's here. So, the only piece we didn't talk about that, maybe we can touch on, Q, I'll ask you this, right? If a digital dollar comes out, is that in some way bullish for Bitcoin, or does it not generally have any effect? With, the question, the context of the question being, does this in some way introduce people to the concept of digital currency if now the dollar is quote unquote digitized?
I think it's tough to value what that would actually mean. Like, it's really like a direct value of digitizing the dollar. I can't put any type of value on it. But I think in a general sense, yeah, when people get more comfortable with the idea that their money is digital, and being able to access it through various apps like you guys are talking about, maybe having a wallet if you're unbanked, like Dimitri was saying, I think that helps, because we've seen WeChat, we've seen all these things where they have Alipay in China. People who are more involved in digital currency, when they're talking about being able to pay with Alipay at any vendor, people just like tapping phones, right? Like that's normal, that's commonplace in China, and that's the reason, at least that's a theory, of why the Asian countries have taken more significant adoption of digital currencies like Bitcoin. So I think yes, that is going to be a value add for Bitcoin.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. As is always the case with kind of Bitcoin's potential, time will tell, and we will see. But kind of more on the physical space here, and as a transition into gold, which has been, interestingly enough, a hot topic in the crypto space. The Block has reported that supposedly gold is in short supply. And when I say gold, I mean the actual physical gold, right? So as I'm sure if you've been in crypto for any amount of time, right? Bitcoin, it's digital. One of the main benefits is that it's a lot easier to move than gold, which, is physical, weighs a ton, very difficult to move. And I guess kind of both a shock from a demand standpoint, with a ton of people fleeing into gold as chaos continues to reign, and some of the supply chains that are being disrupted from country to country. There's starting to be kind of some fractures or some disruptions in the gold market, to the point where the futures market was trading significantly higher than the spot market, basically showing you that, even if people can't get physical gold, they're comfortable with the current financial architecture around gold in buying derivatives of gold, assuming that that physical gold is sitting somewhere and just for whatever reason can't be transferred. I mean, this has gotten so bad behind the scenes that the London Bullion Market Association and several other major banks, according to the Block here, have asked the CME Group to change delivery rules for gold to kind of ease some of the trading disruptions that are happening. You can imagine if you're a large broker and you've got some big bank or some giant family office who needs to buy dozens of millions of dollars worth of gold, and you're hearing from CME that they can't get their hands on physical gold. Things start to go haywire in the middle of the day as everybody starts to kind of hear this news. So obviously all the chaos has pumped gold, but perhaps some of these issues with physical delivered gold is also helping the price rise. Gold's sitting at about like $1,620 last I checked. It's got an all-time high of around $1,890, $1,900 which a lot of people think it can get back to here over the next few months. But yeah, it's Deem, I'll kick it over to you here first. It's kind of a crazy time in the gold market. Is there anything that you think is happening behind the scenes, or kind of what's your take on this?
Yeah, so you telling me that I can buy gold, but it doesn't exist? Like, what am I buying there? Yeah, it's a huge struggle. Obviously, it comes at a time when there's a flight to safety, risk off, and it's interesting. Everybody knows that. Yeah, all these derivatives and all this stuff that's being traded, like there's only X amount of actual physical backing behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 100%, with the leverage and everything that's used. So, when it really comes down to redemptions, and if you have mass redemptions, then, it's going to cause any, issues with, you could say with any commodity basically, but gold is used, just in this, right now because of the environment that we have in the market, because everybody's, risk off. But yeah, it's tough, man. It's been like this for a while. It looks like the music is stopping, and everybody's trying to grab their chair, So, and we're definitely going to see some pains from funds that are probably going to take a huge hit on this, and I wonder what kind of restructures are going to happen in terms of actually having enough physical gold and being able to offer that, as far as trading goes. Because if you're offering that product, but you can't back it up with the physical delivery, and extending the delivery, it just gives you more time so you can scramble and buy gold somewhere, melt it, go to your closet, so it's tough. And like I said, it doesn't apply only to gold; it applies to other commodities too. It's just that gold is being a victim right now because of the market's circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's fair to point out that people are buying digital representations of gold. That's interesting. What else could they buy that reminds them of digital gold? But anyways, I think that's a good point, Dimitri. I think gold in this risk-off environment is somehow it's still trying to find itself on the world stage. But we actually had the guys from Terraform Capital. And do you remember what? God, what was Mike?
Yeah.
We had our unprecedented run of 4 mics in a row on the ICO or not ICO, Layer1 podcast. And Mike was saying something about how during the Great Depression, there was a buyback of gold from the U.S. government. Right. And then they marked up gold like 2x or something like that. And they financed the New Deal based on that. What did you think about that concept when he talked about it, Mike?
Nuts. I mean, obviously the Great Depression, I still think we're ways away from that being the case here. Right. I mean, that was like a 5 or 6 year period that it occurred and was obviously, very bad. They call it the Great Depression for a reason. And yeah, basically what he says was that they sold a bunch of gold for, let's say like $15 or something, and then marked it up to like 20, or they bought it. Yeah, they bought it for $15, right? Marked it up to $26 once they had all the gold and then sold it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the biggest insider scheme ever that nobody really talks about. And that was one of my points, right? Like whether it's a digital dollar or gold, there are so many kind of burgeoning narratives or like blooming narratives for Bitcoin that you could see here. With the digital dollar, it's, hey, everything's digitized now. People are going to get into Bitcoin, right? And retail adoption anytime soon. And with gold, gold is going to pitch Bitcoin by itself just with these issues. I mean, obviously, gold is something that's scarce, right? Very similar to Bitcoin, and gold is something that's supposedly supposed to be traceable and able to be tracked, right? There's a whole market, there's a whole infrastructure around that. But if that starts to fall apart, you've got everybody and their mother on Twitter going, well, with Bitcoin, it's on a blockchain. And, here's a real world example of why the blockchain is important. And it's, while it's true, and while you're going to kind of have people shilling that kind of on the pros and the cons of it, I can't help but think that at some point with all of these bullish narratives, that we're just going to get something out of nowhere that pushes Bitcoin forward in some giant mainstream way, right? Like in the same way that you could argue backed launching, I think was a giant flag for a lot of institutional investors to say, oh, wow, like traditional markets are investing in this. This is going to be something that's big. Let me take a chunk, right? What is that next thing? What is that one, or what are those two kind of moments that Bitcoin could have here over the next 6, 12, 18 months where people go, you know what? I get it was speculative, it pumped, it dumped, but actually, there's going to be real value in this because of X or because of X, Y, and Z. So, yeah, I mean, that's just the feeling I'm getting. I don't know. Am I crazy? Is this quarantine getting to me?
No, I think that you're correct. Like a bunch of the things that I've been hearing on Twitter in the tagline now is like Bitcoin was kind of made for this, right? Like this global crisis kind of like catalyzed, maybe pushed us forward. I think it pushed us back a little bit too. I don't know where we sit in this timeline, but I think if you saw another run like we saw in 2017 as we were kind of like making our way into a bull market, maybe that draws in way more retail investors. It gets people interested. But I also think like during this crisis, maybe the bull run's done. Obviously, alt season lasted like all 2 days. But we do have this narrative of, okay, maybe this actually pushes American citizens to understand that their dollar is actually digital already, and maybe you have all of these different processes play out. But I think you're right, man. I think Dimitri, did you have any thoughts there before we get to some comments? Go ahead.
It's interesting how I have more like people, just like normal people that don't know anything about crypto, start asking me about Bitcoin nowadays, and it's interesting, to see how more and more people are kind of like starting to explore this as they see just like these big numbers on the screen, trillions of dollars being printed and so on, right? But I think in crypto, a lot of people like bash on the wall, why isn't Bitcoin blowing up? Because this is what's happening in the market right now. That now is the time. But in crypto, we're like, we're kind of spoiled and used to moving very fast. And now, this should be correlated like this. If the package is coming out now, the Bitcoin should go to the moon. But it's really not how it works. And I think later on we'll see that eventually, once things start escalating with the hyperinflation and issues with other economies and so on, right? Where I talked about, if we have on ramps there for Bitcoin to bring that demand from there, then eventually we'll get there. But in the meantime, there's going to be a deflationary period, that we're part of right now on the dollar side. So therefore, we just have to wait and see when that trigger is going to start happening, or as Mike is saying, for Bitcoin to start rallying based on the fundamentals that it was created on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of purchasing power in the United States. Obviously, we and I don't mean to single us out by any means. It's the West in general, right? Like I think you see in Asia that the population is keen to cryptocurrencies and things like that because they've been introduced. But that's kind of belaboring the point. We've got a ton of comments flowing into the chat. Scott says our image edition here, where we have the columns, is a nice addition. Thank you, Scott. Kieran's talking about the Bitcoin dollar. We're going way back into our conversations here, but we're talking about the Fed pre-sale, private sale, pre-sale, public sale, just basically shitting on the global economics at this point. Andre, welcome to the chat. Prodigy, welcome to the chat. I'm looking for anything that I could say on air here.
Yeah, the chat has kind of devolved into some, I don't know what's going on here about smiles and sexiness and yeah.
Let's see. I don't think there's anything we could say other than Mike Finch saying win gold ICO. We'll see what happens there. So let's go ahead and move on. We appreciate you guys joining. We got about 11 or 12 people in the chat now, and that's without us still on the dashboard. We don't know what's happening with that. We primarily got most of our users in from the dashboard. For whatever reason, YouTube does not have us there. So we'll continue to figure that out, but we appreciate the people that are here now.
Yeah. So let's move right along. So, as Mike said, more like institutional, interesting people are getting into Bitcoin. And this specific piece is CME Group is exploring, basically options to start mining Bitcoin for their investors. So we know that, on the desk, I cover CME Group almost every single time. And where we look at how the CME Group is positioned, and how they speculate on Bitcoin, and they've been really good, right? So now they're trying to expand further into that Bitcoin sector of basically becoming a miner and start mining Bitcoin, which will offer additional revenue for their shareholders, because I'm pretty sure the shareholders do see that little subsector where they do speculate on Bitcoin and they're making a killing there. So they're like, hey, how about we just what if we start mining this thing? So they start exploring these options, because if you the article actually describes that they are getting into some energy efficient energy sectors where they're going to build out like wind farms and solar energy and so on. And they're saying that the excess of that energy they're considering to use to mine Bitcoin, which will be like an additional revenue. So it's an interesting play, because for CME it's kind of not really their core competencies in terms of like their business, right? To be a miner, especially knowing how saturated right now I guess the mining business is, and these guys are kind of late to the game. So I don't know how much of that is going to be rolled out and how quickly if it is approved by the board and the shareholders. So
there's been a ton of theories thrown around that people are going to start capitulating, or miners specifically are going to start capitulating from Bitcoin and therefore dumping their mining hardware on the market. So that increase in supply could lead to maybe picking up mining rigs for cheap. That way firms like CME or things like CME can go about creating mining rigs for relatively cheap.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm smiling over here because with all of this chaos comes a ton of opportunity, and I think that's basically what CME Group is looking at. They are looking at all of these other kind of brokers in the space, right? Like take DRW and Cumberland. They're a group who mines Bitcoin and also acts as a giant OTC desk for Bitcoin, right? So if you can create what you are buying and selling from people, the opportunities to profit off of that buying and selling open up widely, right? I mean, obviously having some sort of energy efficient solar farm or dams or whatever it is, right? Whether it's solar power or hydropower, that's great too, because then you can reduce the general cost of mining Bitcoin. But we talked about this last week too, with power plants and one specifically in New York who has bought all this mining equipment and is starting to mine Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin gets to a point where as long as kind of the halving doesn't completely screw everybody over and make it super unprofitable for a little while, it gets to a point where it's like, hey, this is just like any other commodity. Whether you think Bitcoin's going to succeed in the future or not, if we can mine for X and sell it for X plus whatever, why are we as a large firm not getting into this business, especially at a time when revenues are down and profitability maybe is kind of struggling? So this is we're kind of stumbling upon what seems to be a bullish episode here for Bitcoin with Layer1Live, whereas the last 2 weeks have been more bearish. But it seems to me that these are incremental steps that 6, 12, 18 months down the road, we're going to look back on and be like, oh my God, it was so obvious, right? Like digital dollar, CME Group mining Bitcoin, right? And, backed selling Bitcoin, right? So there's just so many kind of little pieces that are seemingly still being put into place, even though there's all this chaos in the market. But yeah, Q, you're exactly right. All of these kind of less professional or more amateur miners, if you will, right? If Bitcoin, maybe their break-even price is 8K, and if we're sitting around 6K, they're like, God knows when we'll be back to 8K. Let me just sell this. Let me pull out cash. We'll kind of buy back in when the new chips come out or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. It's super interesting right now on the mining front with the halving and with all these big firms getting in. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, they'd be pretty well off if they, acquire some of the just infrastructure already built. Like you mentioned, the capitulation. Once it happens, and some of these miners are going to start selling everything. If they can come in and pick that up, that would be, pretty good deal for them.
Yeah, that's going to be. I think energy consumption is a huge thing to look at there. Like if you can go to areas where energy consumption is like basically, or the price of energy is basically free. With like areas that I've been hearing Peter Zahan talk about in like Dallas and in Texas areas and other areas where natural gas is starting to like be able to become almost free because we have that natural resource in the United States. I mean, it makes sense for the halving and other firms to kind of see as an opportunity to buy up these rigs cheap. But basically, yeah, that's it. We got the other topic. You guys want to hop into not regular assets, but virtual assets here?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Definitely, man.
All right.
What we got?
Okay, so I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on both crypto voxels, Decentraland, as well as this new project that has been making the rounds. They were, I believe they have a backer, Animoca Brands, which is very closely tied with a lot of NFT projects, but mostly their partnerships with like Dapper Labs and Flow and all of these things have made them relatively well known in the NFT and virtual asset space. But basically, Sandbox is holding a land presale this week. I've got a ton of information because we were talking about it last night, but I want to go through the actual details of the sale for those people who are interested in like buying up virtual real estate at a discount, basically in pre-sales. But I also want to get your thought process on like virtual real estate as you guys see it as a whole, because some people, like you talk to some people, they're super bullish on it, right? Like that's tip of the spear essentially when it comes to like risky assets, right? Like you're already trying to push virtual gold or digital gold onto people. Now you're telling them they could buy a house that they actually own in this virtual world. It just gets down a rabbit hole very quickly. So I want to hear your guys' kind of thoughts on this sector as a whole, but I will go through this land presale really quick. It looks like, and again, Sandbox.game if you guys want to follow along, but this is their third presale round. So the first presale round went for $28 per land. You essentially buy these land pieces and then you can build on top of them. You can you build games within them. I think Second Life is a great example to bring up when you talk about things like this. People have made millions of dollars. Not to say that you're purchasing land just to flip it, right? But people made a ton of money in Second Life. You can also, just live in virtual worlds. We've seen success with things like The Sims. Second Life is that example that I talked about. But people are consistently getting more comfortable with virtual worlds, and now you can purchase actual estates within them. But this Sandbox round, pre-sale round 1, went for $28.80. That was a discount of 40%. They did another round 2, $33, and now this pre-sale round of round 3 is going for $38. That's a 20% discount that they're handing out in these pre-sale rounds, and they'll do 4 of them. They're pretty much giving away 10% of land that will ever exist within the platform, right? So basically what you're getting as an investor here is the opportunity to buy a large chunk of virtual land, whereas you would have to go onto like a secondary market afterwards and purchase it on like OpenSea, which is like a big virtual like people sell crypto kitties, people sell other types of land on this virtual marketplace. So that's basically what's going on. They announced a ton of partners within this different, and I could almost pull it up if I want to, but we'll skip it. They've announced a ton of partners within each round of this land presale. So I'll name a couple. Obviously, CryptoKitties is huge. They've got Neon District, which is another NFT partnership. Dap.com, Wax, MetaMask. Let's go Skyweaver, MetaFactory, Crypto Kaiju. Atari was a big one that they announced recently. But they've essentially just gone about this from a business development stance where they've acquired all these partnerships. They've been able to attract people via these partnerships and via the discount on land. And now we'll see if they can follow through. But those are the details on the actual land sale. I think Crypto Voxels is another virtual reality game, essentially, where you can create your own worlds and things like that. They're doing a sale this week as well. If you guys are interested, we'll put some links in the description after this video to both the Crypto Voxels and the Sandbox, the Sandbox.game pre-sales after this episode's over. So if you guys are interested, otherwise, what do you guys think? I know that was a ton of soapbox talk. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, there's I think there's a lot to unpack here for sure. There's so much happening on the virtual reality / NFT / crypto space. And Sandbox, I think, has done a good job of putting or pulling everyone together who is interested. Like Atari's obviously a huge one. They're a company that we talked about last week on Layer1Live, and got all the different crypto things that they're doing, or virtual reality things that they're trying to do. As kind of a foundational layer, I think a lot of the risk in these projects exists around the fact that just as Bitcoin or ETH or so many other projects retain or create value in the network or community that they're able to put together, this does the same, right? So you go in, you buy land at a pre-sale, right? Theoretically, you can then use that land to build things and sell those homes or coliseums as you built Q for a profit, right? Prodigy's talking about that in the chat now. You can kind of be this digital or virtual realtor, but the risk, of course, is that there's nobody there who cares. If there's nobody there using that digital, reality or virtual reality, then you're kind of stuck playing by yourself in this in this environment. So that's the biggest risk. But it does seem to me that at some point we're going to get to whether it's Sandbox or something else, a network or a community that is big enough that it can retain folks over time. So I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is as well that worries me or kind of holds me back from buying any land or buying any virtual real estate is that it seems to me that we're still so early that there's going to be a much larger company that comes in and does this, whether it's gaming or real estate or something else, where maybe it even combines like STOs, right? So you can buy, STOs of actual physical real estate. And if that network gets big enough, this company starts to do the same with virtual real estate too. So to me, I think there's going to be something there. There's too much happening now. There's too many people involved inside and outside of crypto, but how long it takes for us to get to that point, where we hit that waterfall moment, I don't know.
So you guys are in for a treat there at home, because this is literally like an investment thesis pitch that I'm making to Mike, and also like kind of discussing on both sides, and we're kind of thinking through this, right? I think your points are exactly like on point, right? Like that was something I thought when I was in these virtual worlds, because like Prodigy's saying, I took him into crypto voxels, into that Coliseum that I had bought. I created this new from just a wire frame. I created a kind of Coliseum of sorts, and I was able to then sell that for like 1 ETH more than I bought it for, right? So like it was like a increase in like 25%. But what I also got charged a fee. So this was something that really clicked once that fee hit, right? Because it's a 10% fee of like 4 or 5 ETH. OpenSea and CryptoVoxes are making an absolute killing. And that was what I thought when I made that transaction. It's like, okay, middle of a bear market, middle of a global pandemic crisis, and people are buying virtual land from me for like a 25% profit. It's like, what happens when there is no pandemic, there is a bull run, all of these things are happening? Are people going to be interested in this kind of stuff? And that's where I am with it. I think people will be interested. I liken it, Mike, to something you've been through, which is that hype of to what we've all been through, the gambling platforms right now. I think it's another way to chase yield, and it has the same effect that you're talking about, where, okay, someone else is going to come along and create this, or there's literally going to be 4 or 5 of these that pop up, but which one is going to be the winner? That is fair, that is fair, but this is super interesting, a super interesting time. I think I left off the most important analogy I could, which is, I guess not analogy,
metaphor.
But not metaphor, kind of not a competitor, but someone's within that same sector. It's Minecraft. Minecraft is absolutely gigantic. Go ahead, Dima. I know you probably have some thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, not. I was thinking of Minecraft as well as you were talking about it, how that blew up. But my thing in regards to just these virtual properties and like Decentraland and these companies is that actually now is the time for them to really shine because everybody's at home contained. They're socially distancing each other, and I've talked about this with you guys that what they should really do is they should just have a lot of these crypto conferences on these platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Bring tons of users. That'll bring people. They'll check out real estate, and you can buy real estate advertisement, do a bunch of crazy stuff there that would actually, like, that would push those platforms forward. But I'm surprised they're not doing that yet. Right now it sounds like there's a lot of just speculators that are looking to buy, and flip it for a higher price, and hopefully the next person will come in and buy it for a higher price.
Mm-hmm.
But that, if you have actual use case to it where you get people together during the times when we need social distancing, that's when those platforms are really gonna pick up in use. So I think those platforms really should not miss this opportunity to get exposure and all these business that they can bring during. For them, it's an opportunity basically.
Yeah.
And then after that, once we come out of this social distancing and so on, right, people will be like familiar with it, and maybe we'll still have some conferences that will do virtual meetups. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
That was going to be my next point, was what's the use case? Like, what's the end use case other than the speculative play right now? So with the Minecraft, right, you can do all sorts of stuff in Minecraft. It's at kind of its underlying, function, a game, right? That people play. They play because they enjoy it. And yeah, it's digital and it's kind of this virtual reality, but there is like an underlying use case. So, but whether it's Decentraland or it's crypto or it's Sandbox, right? Like, what is right? Like, if I go and I buy this Coliseum or I buy this house, what am I doing in the house? I just own it. I just kind of look at it, right? But we need, other than the speculative piece, we need that next use case. We need the thing that the end purchaser, the person who's gonna buy that apartment and hold for a year, like, what are they doing with that other than fixing it up and trying to sell it? So if we can get that, if Sandbox can deliver on that as like, oh, hey, I can play, virtual ping pong with somebody in my apartment, and or, to your point, Deem, I can create some giant warehouse and sell booths for some crypto conference,
right,
that I'm running, so that people can come in and talk and, run some biz dev virtually. Then you have the end use case that fulfills the speculative play.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll try to answer some of these just from my time within these games. I think a ton of companies that you see partnering with Sandbox, that you see buying a state within crypto voxels and things like that, where you can buy like different sizes. A ton of these companies are buying larger estates from possibly early investors for the advertisement effect, right? So like, as the users increase within crypto voxels and Sandbox, if you can get even 1,000, 2,000 users, primarily most of which are like art investors right now. But regardless, like, these are just crypto users, right? So like a Meta Factory or even Layer1. Like, let's say we buy an estate within crypto voxels, we throw up Layer1 on there. It's in a popular area. That means that there's high foot traffic. People are seeing Layer1 podcasts. That has an effect of advertisement, and that's where you see a ton of companies kind of coming into Sandbox games. Almost all of those partners that I talked about, Atari, CryptoKitties, Flow, all of the Wax, they're all going to have estates, and they show up on this map already and with their goddamn logo right there. So whenever Sandbox talks about their game and people see it, they're seeing Wax, they're seeing CryptoKitties. So the companies are using this as an opportunity to advertise themselves to NFT users, right? Like, that's a value case for purchasing land for these companies. From a user perspective, like I said, most of these users are NFT users, so they can come in and actually purchase. Like, if I'm interested in virtual art, I need a place, like we talked about, to show this off to other people. Now, these virtual worlds, like, I can create a house that now has the art that I created or that I purchased from someone in that location. So it's super niche. Like, it's not going to be something that most people are interested in, but just like Bitcoin, every day we see more people get into this. Every day there's another user that says, oh my God, like, I have virtual art and I can place it in a house. Okay, I'm going to go to OpenSea and now buy this from someone else, maybe at a higher price. I guess the only other thing I would say to that, you're pretty much just asking like global macro, like what is the use case if there's no community? And I think, and what is the use case of like these areas? I think you look at, you look outside of blockchain, right? Like I think Grand Theft Auto is a great example. Grand Theft Auto created this whole damn community around being in like an online world, right? And there was an actual casino within Grand Theft Auto that got shut down because so many people were using it that were outside jurisdiction. So that's an example of a game, Grand Theft Auto, that has a game within it, a casino, and people can use that within that. You could turn that into Sandbox.game. You could put that into Decentraland. It can't be shut down, yada, yada, yada. And then you have that functionality within, it's like a game within a game like you're talking about. But that's not there yet. So you got to look at other games like Grand Theft Auto, like, Minecraft.
Sims was obviously a big one for a time, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a fair point. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Grand Theft Auto Casino got shut down because so many people were using it and like laundering money through it and stuff. So that is really a perfect example of kind of what my next point was, you know, in regards to your points there, and that maybe to your point, you don't need that immediate use case. Maybe if you can get enough people interested in this, right, and there's enough businesses like a Wax and a Flow and all these that just exist here, that this becomes a place where, to start, obviously the crypto community wants to be, right? And classic crypto, right, start with speculation, you attract people, that attraction turns into some sort of use case that emerges there, a la the Grand Theft Auto Casino. Maybe it does happen that way, right? Maybe you don't need the initial use case to draw people in. Maybe the speculation, maybe the quote unquote coolness of it is enough to start. So yeah, that's super interesting as to kind of see where we're at. Obviously, we've come a long way from Decentraland's ICO, you know, in 2018 to where we are now. So
we had that discussion. Yes, Dimitri, I'm not going to cut you off here, but if you had anything to build off of that, but we did have that discussion in the chat yesterday about where kind of Decentraland lacked, right? Because most people know within crypto, they know Decentraland had that huge ICO where they were like selling off this land or mana and all these things. Two things that happened with Decentraland. One, OpenSea wasn't big back then. So primarily what you see with most of these NFTs now, they're all traded on OpenSea, almost exclusively. Like there's different marketplaces, but there's OpenSea.io, I believe, has all of these different digital assets for sale that didn't exist when Decentraland launched. So you could literally buy parcels right now as Sandbox game goes live and sell them on OpenSea right now. Whereas Decentraland, you needed to wait 2 years before you even got your land, let alone sell it, right? So there's a problem there. And then Decentraland also had this big issue of they went about it from the wrong standpoint of creating their world, right? Like, so I can't hop into Decentraland right now unless I'm know a lot about parcel creation. That is like creating a world inside these worlds. They made it super hard to do, whereas CryptoVoxels made it super easy. So people can't go in there and create a house and a dog and a car, whereas in these other games they can. Dimitri, did you have anything before we move on? I know that's a super long rabbit hole, but did you have anything?
No, that was about it. I think we covered a lot of different angles about this. It's definitely an interesting topic and interesting how that's gonna progress. But
last point I would make, it would be really cool to like have us having like imagine us having a spot in like one specific area. So like foot traffic obviously increases value. So like the areas around where the actual first spawn point, like you've been in WoW and all these other things, Dima, the area around the first spawn point is the most valuable because new users, that's the first thing they see. Imagine a Layer1 like podcast studio where us three, when we hop into these Layer1Lives, our virtual selves are in there and they could hear us talking, and it would be like a virtual, I can listen to this podcast and I can be there, right? And it shows us three with our little microphones and all this stuff.
That'd be dope.
Yeah, that would be dope. But and then Prodigy makes a good point. What if they made it like VR interactive so people could feel more immersed? VR tech needs to come far, right? It needs to look more legitimate before these things can be popular. But that is it for me, fellas. That was my big thing. You guys have the rest of the episode. Go ahead.
No worries. I think what I'm going to do is after this episode, I'm going to try to create an NFT version of like a face mask and start selling that on OpenSea.
There you go. I love it, dude.
That could be big. That's the new fashion these days. But anyway, we will move on. So guys, as you can see on the dashboard, if you're following along, basically we're going to move into Bitcoin here. Then we're also talking a little bit of Ethereum. We've got a bunch of EOS news, and then some smaller news on Tezos, Ripple, and Binance, and we will be done. So first piece here, as I'm sure everybody has seen, the Bitcoin mining difficulty has posted the second biggest percentage drop in its history. So hash rate has been something that's been fluctuating up and down. Year to date, it's still up 7%. But obviously, if you take a look at, on blockchain.com or really any other data site should have information on the hash rate, you can see it has taken a dip. So, this mining difficulty has dropped by nearly 16%. And like I said, it is the second largest decline in history. Theories around this happening are obviously as the price has dumped and because the halving is coming up on almost a month away, a little over a month away now, I guess, depending on where we are at the block header. There's a lot of concern on kind of the viability of being a smaller Bitcoin miner. So theory is these smaller Bitcoin miners are leaving in droves. Whether or not they're selling Bitcoin, who knows? And then you can kind of see that hash rate bounce back as maybe bigger miners jump on and kind of take some of that some of that hash rate. Interestingly enough, as well, alongside this, you have Bitcoin Cash miners who are leaving Bitcoin Cash to come and mine on Bitcoin because of the mining difficulty drop, right? So it now becomes more profitable, when you run the numbers for these Bitcoin Cash miners to mine on Bitcoin. Obviously, like I said, the halving hits, everything changes, everything's cut in half. And maybe those miners go back to Bitcoin Cash because there's not as much competition. But a lot going on behind the scenes with Bitcoin miners. This hash rate or mining difficulty drop has kind of been the biggest news as of late. But it's been something we've been following, something we've been looking at for a long time. So, Q, you have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, we talked about hash rate when it came to all these miners capitulating. That's where I'm concerned with hash rate, right? Like if you see all these small to medium size, if you see all these small to medium size firms kind of drop out and most of this hash rate get gobbled up by like a primarily, 4 or 5 firms, like that just decreases the decentralization of Bitcoin. It hurts that kind of narrative there. So, there have been a lot of like data issues with this, right? Like from like a block explorer perspective hasn't this like mining hash rate, like, isn't it affected by more than a couple things when it comes to like data points, right? I'm blanking, but I know like before it's been like, oh, Bitcoin hash rates dropped, and that's because people are leaving the space, and it actually is because of like some feed that like block transactions go down after a certain period. Am I blanking here?
Interesting. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but it obviously is made up of a lot of inputs that This is one of those kind of classic Bitcoin FUD things to me too, right? I mean, every halving, right? Like I remember in 2016, there was giant FUD around this, quote unquote mining spiral. And it was like every kind of new person in crypto, which I was, one of at the time, was like, wait a minute, I thought the halving was supposed to pump the price. What's this mining spiral? Like, oh my God, sell it all, right? And the same thing is starting to happen. It seems to happen every time where, basically the network adjusts for price drops or adjusts for the imposing halving, which is obviously, the biggest kind of fee drop, if you will, or reward drop when it comes to Bitcoin. So, you always want to see the hash rate continuing. You want to see it headed north. Like I said, it is still up 7% year to date, but I don't think this is kind of like an end of times mining spiral kind of issue, because you're seeing, like I said, Bitcoin Cash miners come over and mine Bitcoin. I think there's enough at this point, having, had Bitcoin around for 11 years, where let's say even the price drop, dumps in half and we're at like 3150 on Bitcoin, right? Yes, a ton of miners are going to pull off, but so many that are well capitalized are just going to eat up all that Bitcoin and hold it and sell it, at a later time when maybe the price is higher. That I really don't think there's any significant risk in a mining spiral. 2012, totally get it, right? Bitcoin's been around for 3-4 years, totally understand. But here, it just, while it's something to track, it doesn't seem to be a super risky to me. I know that doesn't answer your question, but was kind of a general point I wanted to allude to as well on this topic.
Yeah, the point before we get to Dimitri, and this is not from me. This is not an original thought, as most of my thoughts are taken from other people, like everyone else. But it says hash rate is always just an estimation based on difficulty and average block time. There's no actual way to see the exact total hash power of the network. Generally, huge spikes in up and down. Generally, huge spikes up or down are that the estimation being thrown off by block time variance. So that's just a quote taken from a random ass Telegram group I'm in. Don't take it for a grain of salt, but that was what exactly I was getting at.
Gotcha. Deem, are you worried at all about the hash rate stuff, or just kind of business as usual?
Yeah, not too much. From my kind of research and understanding of it, just in regards to miners capitulating and dumping on the market, there has been some research or some papers that I read where it did show miners dumping, basically capitulating in current times, and where Bitcoin is, now basically where we came back from. But, at the same time, also the point is that the market is able to eat that up without significantly being impacted to the downside for Bitcoin. So I think we just have enough of, interest and like infrastructure in terms of derivatives, futures, and so on, right, for Bitcoin, that, when we do have an issue where some of these miners that start capitulating and dumping and getting out, then that can be eaten up by the market without really making too big of a splash. And like you mentioned, bigger players are well capitalized, so they're not going to be affected like that. So
yeah, I would imagine if I'm like a Bitmain or a MicroBT or somebody like this, having gone through that before, they've got to be looking at this and saying like, hey, investors, right, we don't just want to raise $300 million to better capitalize the business. We want to be able to take advantage of all of this, lessening of the mining difficulty and get in and make all this Bitcoin so that we can sell it at that time or later in the future. So that, like I said, that's going to be a topic that keeps coming up around Bitcoin. I'm sure if it continues to kind of go haywire, we might even see some mainstream, some sort of Wall Street Journal or Forbes article about how it's the end of Bitcoin or some BS like that. So, we always kind of want to make sure you guys are getting the inside scoop on hash rate, versus listening to some others that maybe don't fully know what they're referring to there. So.
Yeah, and we're planning on having Kudo on in the coming weeks, so maybe they can take us through, because they do have their hands in Bitcoin mining and other things like that, other processes like that. So hopefully we can really get down to the bare bones with them. That would be an interesting discussion. We do have to get to the chat. Obviously, Prodigy was in the chat, but Kieran is literally going crazy in the chat, man. I don't know what's happening here. He said, "Okay, I finalized my token economics paper. It's in the Telegram group. Please review." And then I go to our Layer1 Telly, and it's literally just like 20 bars long of length, and it looks like he's got himself a thesis on how we can go about making some money. I don't know what's going on, Kieran, but we appreciate the comments, man. Thanks.
It's the hustle. Maybe this is the gold ICO I was talking about. You running with this, Kieran? Is that what's happening? But yeah, chat is blowing up today for sure. I'm going to move on to ETH 2.0 here, kind of a snag unless you guys have any other points. So, as is necessary, ETH has gone through an audit, and unfortunately, ETH 2.0 has kind of hit some snags. This audit has highlighted what the block is calling potential security vulnerabilities. So there's two in particular. Again, this is not something that's live. This is an audit of ETH 2.0 code, and the first potential issue has to do with the block proposer system. So if you're not familiar, essentially in proof of stake, there has to be a block producer that decides which block will go into the chain, right? So if it's delegated proof of stake, generally there's one node who will kind of put together that group or that committee that says, hey, this is the block that I propose. All of you guys, validate this block. Please let me know or kind of make sure that this is everything here is correct. There's not sort of any, double spend happening or anything like this. So, the audit basically came out and recommended some things that they think should happen with ETH 2.0's block proposer system, and I'm sure the Ethereum team will kind of take those notes and hopefully heed them there before the first kind of phase 0 of ETH 2.0 launches. The second one is a spam problem. You see this in a ton of other proof of stake blockchains, but basically, there's this kind of peer-to-peer messaging system that will occur in the protocol. And if you don't have any way to kind of set up like an anti-spam feature, you run into this risk of people just spamming, and it slows down or can even halt network processing for the duration that the spamming is carried out. I think generally you see this less in an attack vector and more of a way for blockchains to kind of say like, hey, look at all these transactions we're doing. We did 1 million transactions a day. And then if you look, most of it is just spam where, you could go to your IOST wallet or your EOS wallet or whatnot. And as those networks are first launching, you get dozens or hundreds of transactions that are like, hey, vote for this node, blah, blah, blah. And it's just various people kind of spamming the network because the fees that are required to send those messages are very low. So those were the two main things. Obviously not dire for ETH in any way. Again, this is just an audit. But, I feel like at a time when so much is happening in the world as a whole and all the chaos happening there and all of the chaos happening in crypto, we need some good news for ETH 2.0, and we haven't gotten that from the audit. The one thing that the audit also recommended was that obviously there's kind of like a test net, right? Or
jungle.
A jungle of sorts where various test net participants, various nodes can come in and mess with phase 0 of ETH 2.0. Vitalik has said, of course, yes, this will happen. And he has also said that he thinks April is a viable time for that to begin. So, they've talked before about phase 0 coming in July or at least summer 2020. They've previously said that they think there's a 95% chance that we will get ETH 2.0 launched in some form by the end of 2020. So point being is I don't think this audit is serious enough to kind of push back ETH 2.0 in any significant way. But, is obviously super important and something to kind of follow up on, understanding that ETH 2.0 is going to hopefully be a giant bullish event for Ethereum in general.
If the amount of users don't increase within the general crypto community, is ETH 2.0 even like an incentivized situation for the ETH community? Like, is ETH 2.0 like primarily like moving to a proof of stake network officially means, hey, we're really scaling out this network? Is that primarily what ETH 2.0 is trying to accomplish, or at least one of the main factors?
It's definitely one of the main factors, right? Like I think transitioning the more centralized kind of big business proof of work structure to what will hopefully be a more democratized proof of stake setup where with ETH, where you only have to have, I think the latest numbers were 32 ETH to run a node, right? Even if it's a light client, that makes it a lot easier for people to feel like they're contributing to the network versus just speculating and buying the token. So that's the incentives there are definitely a big one. And then obviously the second piece is scalability, right? Is actually building out the underlying infrastructure where a CryptoKitties, a Sandbox, right? All of these all these big things that are happening, stable coins, right? Which I think is worth a discussion on ETH 2.0 here. As all of these things are growing, if ETH can't keep up, eventually there will be that migration of sorts that all these other protocols are constantly talking about.
Yeah, I only asked that question too, and that was a good point. Like the first point in particular of kind of not decentralizing but more democratizing ETH in a little bit in a way. The only reason I brought that question up is because what is the actual incentive to get ETH 2.0 pushed out quickly, right? If the community is not increasing and therefore the scalability is not that big of an issue, then I don't really see the incentive for these guys to really like create a problem for themselves, right? Because that's what it is. Like, it's a potential problem. ETH moving to ETH 2.0 has a whole bunch of stipulations attached that, could eventually lead to kind of like not an Armageddon of any sorts for the network, because they're going to be fine, but it's definitely an issue, right? Like, so I just don't see the incentive. Like, if I had to bet money if ETH 2.0 came out this year, I would not bet money that ETH 2.0 would be rolled out. But Dimitri, you got anything?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that I mean, I agree with what you said. That makes complete sense. I was gonna say that for the stable for ETH 2.0 stable coins, it's gonna be interesting to see how that's gonna affect like that side of in DeFi. This huge risk. So I don't think anybody wants to take on that risk. And also at the same time, things might sound really good on paper for ETH 2.0, and they might go through multiple audits and so on, all these things, right? But we know that once things get released on the market, that's really going to be the true test, right? So, and you can do as much testing as possible, but in the end, the market will really dictate, certain issues and holes that will need to be patched up quickly. So I think them obviously doing extreme due diligence with the auditing and all that stuff to make sure that it's as close to perfect as possible. But the real test is going to be once it's released, how quickly they're going to be in fixing those patches that the market will find.
Love it.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, right? We talked a little bit about stablecoins last week. They continue to grow, right? Like Tether is over a $4 billion market cap now. Paxos, USDC, TUSD a little bit seem to be leading the way. Imagine a scenario here where stablecoins continue to grow as investors around the world try to flee to the US dollar, right? It's that deflationary environment that you were talking about a little while back on this podcast, Deem. Imagine a scenario where stablecoins grow to the nth degree, right? And become, in the same way a digital dollar would, kind of this on-ramp to a concept of digital money or digital currency. And then ETH 2.0 comes out and everything just goes to shit, right? And they have some sort of catastrophic issue, like you said, Q, and now you have stable coins where non-crypto folks are trying to access them, right? Giant businesses are trying to use USDT or Paxos, and there's some sort of exploit or some sort of slowdown with ETH 2.0. I mean, is that something that an ETH could recover from, to your point then? I mean, good Lord.
Well, ETH would recover. It's the people, right? Like most of my thought process is built around that interview we had with Tim Ogilvy from Staked, where he was like, our infrastructure is literally set up for the staking networks that are happening like now, like as ETH is in its normal state. So when it moves to ETH 2.0, I mean, how much of hundreds of millions of dollars is within Staked? I don't know exactly, but like, it's not an easy thing. And that's where most of my thought process is, hearing from like the horse's mouth. Tim Ogilvy running Staked, it's like that doesn't just affect like random people, it affects hundreds of millions of dollars, like you're talking about with these stable coins. I don't know the answer.
it's a terrifying it's a terrifying thought to kind of just roll with, right? It's that so much business currently, so much value currently hinges on this one blockchain that has had issues before in the past, right? That is run by humans that have, the human error attached. And if it continues down the path that it's continuing, I mean, get it right, boys. Don't screw this up for everybody, kind of thing, Which
is why I was saying about the pushing it back. What's the incentive needs to be strong enough to like, hey, we need to switch to ETH 2.0, whereas going about what they're doing now doesn't seem like that big. Dima, did you have something there?
No, that's I think we covered the a lot there. So
Okay. All right, we got some comments that I wanted to get to. Prodigy's in the chat. He's saying, having a few drinks listening to y'all is super informative, even though I'm a noob at this kind of stuff. Enjoy the content, boys. That's a great comment, man. I think as content creators, we're always kind of like trying to figure out who the audience is, right? Like, or like as we continue down this road, or we don't want to kind of like bring it down to such a level where guys that have been in for a long time, like I'm sure Kieran has, like I'm sure a lot of the guys have, we don't want to like bring it down too much, but we also want to appeal to you guys that are generally new. As Mike makes himself a drink. You making an old fashioned there, or what's going on?
I'm drinking with you, Prodigy. Here we go, man.
Love
Cheers.
it. Cheers. Nastrovia.
yeah.
But anyways, we appreciate that comment, man. We do want to, appeal to people who are newer to the space. If you have questions, certainly this isn't going to be like a FAQ on crypto. But if you do have questions, man, throw them in there, as we'll get to here in a sec. So his one question was, so if you see a downfall of, I'm assuming he was talking about ETH, would it be idea to sell out and reinvest in another currency since it's changing? So no investment advice per usual. But what do you have to say to that, Dima?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. There's so many variables, right? It's just the scope of things, right? If the network is just having a hiccup, but they're gonna fix it, patch it up, then maybe not. But like, there's definitely a potential. Yeah, there's a risk. If things go really south, then some people might hop out, into a different protocols and networks. And those are the networks that are hoping that that's gonna happen. They're standing by for something to go bad.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like the standby, protocols basically. So,
and to add on to that, I feel like ETH is at a point now where almost like regardless of what happens, right? Unless like the blockchain just completely disappears and there's some sort of catastrophic moment that like I can't even imagine off the top of my head, to where like even DeFi exploded and ETH's like, yeah, fuck DeFi. Like we don't care. That was a terrible idea from the jump, right? Yeah. Like I can't imagine a scenario where ETH, something so bad happens with ETH that community disappears, fully and moves to an EOS or moves to somewhere else. So yeah, some terrible DAO hack type event happens again and ETH, dumps by 50% in price. Moves back the timeline, right? All these bad things happen. Will that quote unquote kill ETH? I don't think so. I think it just kind of pushes everything back and maybe opens the door a little bit for new protocols, but that first mover advantage that ETH has, and now the stable coin business that ETH has is so kind of meta in a lot of ways that I don't think they lose that.
What's an analogy to another industry that ETH is ETH and other competitors are going through right now, where we all know ETH maybe technologically is not as advanced, but it is benefiting from this community, and that's where I would put it, because I think I talked with you about this and you were saying this, and I was reading Naval say the same thing. It's like when you invest in different companies, especially from like a venture standpoint, you're investing in the leaders of those companies, right? Like you're not just investing in the project, you're not just investing in Ethereum, you're investing in, I wouldn't say in this example it would be Vitalik, it would be the community. Like that's where your investment thesis comes from. It's like, well, who cares what happens on the platform? They have all of these people, right. And they have the biggest community other than the Bitcoin community. So,
and it's a community that, a large part, I don't know if it's the majority, but definitely on the developer front, right? Like from a developer community, you talk to a lot of those people as we have, and they don't care about the price. You know what I mean? They care more about the technology than they do the price. Right there, it's always been like, hey, this is a technology from the future, right? We have the ability to build on this and hopefully change the world one day. Theoretically, the price should go up. So why would I care if it's down 20% year to date, right? Why do I care if this month, it got super wrecked with the rest of the economy? I just keep building, kind of thing. And that is definitely super powerful. I don't remember what your question was, but
go ahead, Dima.
It's because they don't leverage. That's why they don't hit BitMEX. They don't use 50x leverage. So they don't care when the spot falls.
True. I guess you're the king of metaphors. I'm getting a ton of messages. I don't know if can you guys hear that bell every like 5 seconds?
Yeah,
you can. If you can't, never mind. The king of metaphors, Mike Finch himself. What is the metaphor from ETH to its competitors to like another industry that where you say like they've already amassed this massive community where it doesn't matter what the tech is, it doesn't matter little slight hiccups.
The only one that immediately came to mind for me was Uber, right? So Uber did a very good job of going out and putting it everywhere. And they've had giant issues. They've had issues with driver violence. They've had issues with their app. I mean, I feel like still to this day, 1 to 2 out of 10 times I get in an Uber, it's somebody who's going, hey man, can you tell me how to get there? The Uber maps are screwing up. You know what I mean? But Uber has gotten to a point where they have like the Kleenex effect, right? Where people say, hey, don't pass me a tissue, pass me a Kleenex, right? Oh, well, we'll just take an Uber. So yeah, even if Lyft comes out and they have better cars and they have better drivers, and yeah, they're a big business as well, they still have not been able to dethrone Uber, even with the better, systematic structure that a lot of people say Lyft has. So that, I'm sure I could get to a better metaphor as the metaphor king with a little more time.
Yeah, if it pops in your head, go ahead and talk about it. I remember Simon Sinek was talking about a negative example of this where it actually didn't work out was TiVo. Whereas when we were recording a TV show, it was always, hey, I'm going to TiVo that, right? And TiVo was an actual company. It wasn't the process of doing that. But you see TiVo just completely like lost its edge. But yeah, no, I love that. I actually like that metaphor, Uber, that was used. So I guess we'll move on. Someone want to read Kieran's comment while I move this thing to EOS really quick? Sorry.
Yeah, so Kieran's saying, I'm well stocked on my wine, though I'm almost out of my bottle of Michter's and only have a bottle of Chivas Regal left in the whiskey front and only have half a bottle of Bacardi on the rum front. Damn, man. So it sounds like quarantine is really hitting Kieran hard when it comes to his liquor stock. Yeah. Well, you got to find somebody to barter with. I'm going to end up probably later today trading some vodka and some bourbon for some toilet paper with my wife's parents. So you gotta find somebody with some booze and trade them some trade them something else, trade them some chips or who knows.
Gotcha. All right, well, I couldn't stand that anymore, so I had to go turn off my phone. Never gotten more notifications, Mike. That was from our group chat there. And you guys, I think, got to look at my my desktop there just for a second. But anyways, we'll move on to EOS. I switched over our column here. Three main conversations to be had here, all that have to, at least in some way or form, happen around Block.one. So Block.one's been historically inactive, at least for like the past year, I would say, or some people would say since the ICO. But they are deploying $150 million towards voice, and this is going to go $50 million towards IP, and $100 million is going to like developing independent projects within voice. Now, Block.one always plays it close to the vest, right? Like we don't know exactly what that is going to be, and I think Dan and Brendan both came out in the past week and said and specifically Dan came out and said that there's going to be like a bunch of there's going to be a bunch of announcements on goings on within voice and third-party applications and things like that are being developed, but they like to play it close to the vest. Nothing is coming about. So this was initially from the Block. This was an okay article from the Block. I think they got some things wrong, but I think they go on to say that Block.one has spent a total of $300 million up to this point on voice, including that big payment of $30 million toward voice.com. So yeah, I mean, it's good to see them deploying capital to voice. We'll see where that actually I'm imagining all the Block.one wearing vest gear.
Sorry, I had to troll you there. I didn't mean to interrupt your thought process.
No worries. But yeah, I mean, that's the story. Block.one putting those billies to work. I think it's like 4.2 if I'm not mistaken. They obviously raised a ton of money. Speaking of why you would invest in projects right now, we talked about East Community, and I'm sure they obviously have a ton of capital too. EOS being a good example of why you would invest in a company. They have a ton of runway. I don't even know that it can be even called a runway at this point. What would you call $4.2 billion?
Oh my God. It's like a runway to the moon. That's really what it is.
That's what we're hoping. And but anyways, that is that story. Did you guys have any thoughts on $150 million toward voice?
Is there any like updates on voice beta? Like, I feel like that kind of phased out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been probably going into voice every like 3 days and just like seeing what's going on there. Not much. I think you could get much more information on voice from like following people who are super active. I think Zach Gall from ICO Alert, or formerly ICO Alert, now everything EOS, and Liquid Apps is on there. So if you want to follow along with like voice every day, I would say follow Blockchain Zach at Twitter. But
Yeah, definitely. My only other point was going to be that this is not the first investment they've made. They've already put 150 million into voice, so this totals at 300 million now. 30 million spent on the website. You said 50 mil of this new 150 mil going into IP. So they, this seems to be like one of those things that non-EOS folk in the crypto community are going to laugh at. But it seems that at least at face value, Block.one is playing not only this close to the vest, but playing the long game with this, right? And if you're spending that much money on IP, right, I have to imagine that they're looking way down the road and saying, okay, how can we kind of avoid potential IP issues when this becomes a big successful social media platform, right? There's no other reason why with so few users you would spend that much money on IP. So anytime a project in crypto gets $300 million, even if it's from the company that owns that app, I mean, that's huge. So they continue to push forward with voice. And like I was saying to you, I think in our Telegram chat, EOS will continue to remain a sleeper when compared to ETH as long as they have this cash, as long as, they don't get hacked or put a bunch of money into something that ends up crashing. They're going to remain a sleeper because of that cash.
Yeah, I wanna get to one comment that Scott left earlier. He said we have EOS, EOS.io, and DApp to help ETH scale. I think we need to have the DApp network or somebody else from the DApp network team, because we did have Pete on. I would love to have him on again, but I don't want to rerun through guests. But if we have I'm blanking on his name. CEO of DApp, the DApp network. But if we could have, is it Benny? I don't know. Anyways, if we could have them on to just explain kind of what the goings on are with interoperability, I wouldn't even know the first thing about how EOS. I understand the concept, right? Like you put it. I think someone like got 150,000 just from running all of the Ethereum system within an EOS smart contract.
The giveaway, right?
I understand yeah, it is Benny. Okay. But I understand the concept, but like what is the actual day-to-day process there, right? Like does that take control away from the Ethereum community? Because that makes me think that Ethereum's not going to want, or the people that are running these systems with Ethereum are not even going to want to be associated with stuff like that. So
yeah,
I need to talk with Benny. I would love to get him on to explain like the goings on with that. So did you have any thoughts about EOS scaling ETH or Bitcoin?
No, I think that's a fair point, right? Like to some degree, or to a lot of, to a majority degree, those involved in ETH development have the choice of what they're going to use to develop, right? I mean, obviously there are restrictions in building on ETH right now from a scalability standpoint and even a usability standpoint still. I mean, you can look through a variety of different Twitter threads that talk about some of the gas issues, right, that exist on the current infrastructure on ETH. So it's, that's always kind of, to me, kind of like a moonshot scenario of like an entire Ethereum community seeing the main competitor to ETH as like the solution. It just doesn't click, That's like all of the Michael Jordan fans all of a sudden saying, yeah, LeBron's the greatest ever. Like it's never going to happen. Yeah. Right.
Well, never say never, but I do agree with that point a little bit, that it does seem like too far like out of that zone. But the thing that I'm trying to get at here is like, I think we may be missing something. Like that's the only thing, like making an assumption based on something where people that are within this interoperability space kind of live. So, but I right now I do agree with you. I do agree with you on that.
Let me ask you this as we move through EOS here, because this was probably one of the most fascinating stories I've seen, not just on crypto projects, but specifically delegated proof of stake and nodes, right? this came out and no, like, I feel like Coindesk isn't talking about it. Like a lot of major people aren't talking about it, but Block.one has absorbed EOS New York. What on earth does that mean, and why?
I mean, I think they're shutting down the node. I know the website's done, and I think they're just like working within Block.one now. Obviously, Block.one has all of this capital. We just talked about that. So I think they basically took the devs that were working on EOS New York, and they are now part of Block.one's team. That's basically what that means. I don't.
Wow.
That obviously means that EOS New York is completely like shutting down. But I don't know They at one point they used to be the best node on the network. Like EOS Nation had just like started and like was not that they had just started.
Block producer.
Yeah, EOS New York. This was the days when like Cypherglass was in top 10. Like EOS New York was there. Like so, it is crazy to see like them get absorbed into Block.one, but they're not nowhere near what they used to be as far as like in that top ranking, in like the block producer rankings.
I remember before the name of Cypherglass ever even came about, myself and Rob and some other folks, Rick was there, I think. Some of the T0 guys were there. EOS New York put on a giant event in New York on EOS. And they had some of the original kind of like EOS governance people there. I can't remember the guy's name, older gentleman. But yeah, you're right. I mean, EOS New York was huge, but my main point in bringing this up too as a big happening is that I don't think we have ever seen a proof of stake network with an underlying foundation or company ever kind of quote unquote absorb or acquire a well-known, strong node brand under their protocol.
That's a fair point. I'm going to check blocks.io right now and see where exactly, if their node isn't shut down already, I wonder where these node or where EOS New York is at this point. Scott, you're in the chat. Obviously, you're heavily involved in EOS. There's a couple other people that are following EOS very closely. What do you think this means as far as this discussion goes while I look at EOS New York?
Yeah, he's saying Thomas Cox was the guy who I was trying to think of there. It's wild, right? It again, I think it's going to be one of those things that kind of people look back on and are like, holy shit, like this is the first example of a foundation pulling from a quote unquote decentralized community and absorbing in this case that human capital. Because remember, right, like EOS New York has some very what's the best way to put this? Some very experienced people under them, right? Like the head of EOS New York used to run a very popular website. He might still to some degree. I think it's called Dig, D-I-G-G. So these are people with very a ton of experience just in general business. So maybe this is something where Block.one is looking at expanding in the U.S. and in general. Obviously, EOS has a huge foothold in Asia with all of the exchange, kind of counterparts when it comes to the nodes that are in the top 21. So if they can kind of quote unquote partner or absorb EOS New York, understanding the almost social media history within EOS New York, and I'm sure a lot of the talent, where does that put things in the future?
Yeah, I really wonder at EOS New York's position. I'm trying to. It seems like 10 years ago now, but when EOS was first starting and Cypherglass was first starting, EOS New York was kind of a bastion for like Western block producers, right? But then we had all these issues with East versus West, and I think if I'm not mistaken, EOS New York took a pretty strong stance with like being a Western block producer and all of these things that go along with it. Whereas EOS Nation, which is now number 2, when we had that team on, they were talking about how they took the opposite approach, where they really wanted to create like a bridge to the East. So that, and that obviously that business development helps them with tokens, right? With voters. I'm sure a majority of their voters do not come from. While they do come from Western users, I'm sure the majority of their votes come from Eastern, other block producers, possibly things like that, other exchanges, based on talking with Steph and Eve.
So interesting.
But yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, close to the vest, as Block.one always does. We'll see what ES New York does within the Block.one offices. So I think I didn't tell you guys, but Ash it has a job at Block.one now. It's like
Wow.
public knowledge now, so I can say it on live. But Ash is actually in Blacksburg and working at Block.one, so that's pretty cool. So
Nice.
they're amassing a certain amount of people that work at Block.one. So last bit of news, we talked about EOS Nation here. EOS Nation's worker proposal system, basically a way to fund different projects within the EOS ecosystem, kind of like from a community approach. Actually got approved. So stage 1 was getting at least the proposal approved by the top 21 block producers. I'm going to go into the article now and see. Actually, I'm going to a tweet by Eve, and which I'll link here. I should probably do that more often, to be honest, so that you guys can follow along. But that is the tweet. I'll read it word for word here. It's like EOS Nation said, today we executed the first of 4 multi-sig proposals or multi-sigs to implement the worker proposal on EOS. The first multi-sig consisted of creating the EOS WPS system account, and we're happy to report 34 approvals from block producers. So 34 approvals, they got 19 out of the top 21. So that proposal is approved now and going forward, even though Brendan came out and said he doesn't like the worker proposal system. For those of you following along, the WPS is basically a way for the community to hand out in $25,000 clips money to people that are building on EOS. So the fact that this is going through, I think, is a positive.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I do not understand why Brendan would ever be against that. Maybe they're moving to try to garner more control by scooping up all these major Western, block producer names. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it's a regulatory thing. Who knows? But that worker proposal system is a dream of many other protocols that that want that. So
I said $25,000. It's 25,000 EOS, obviously. Sorry, go ahead.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's interesting. So as we're approaching 2 hours here on the podcast, I've got Tezos, and then Deem has Ripple and Binance. I'm just gonna fly through Tezos here. Tezos, obviously has been one of the better performing assets of 2019, and even has bounced back decently in 2020 after the big dip. So basically, one of the things that the Tezos Foundation does in an effort to be super transparent is they put out these semi-annual or biannual reports. They just released their second one. Kind of some broad numbers. There were 200 various proposals submitted to the Tezos Foundation in an effort for each of those proposals to get a grant, right? So the total assets under management at the time of the biannual report shows $635 million, a good chunk of which the Tezos Foundation uses to deliver grants. So they had 200 proposals on these grants, very similar to the worker proposal system we talked about. And 78 of those grants were given. So quite a bit more than you saw in the first biannual report. They're kind of speeding up there. They also talked about how they have 8 new partnerships. And of those 78 grants, they came from 26 total countries, kind of alluding to the fact that Tezos is more distributed. The interesting thing in this as well is that they disclose that they appear to have sold about 8,000 Bitcoin in exchange for fiat, i.e. dollar, euro, right? Kind of the various fiat currencies they hold, bonds and ETFs in 2019. So, fiat, right? If it's dollar's been going up, that's a good buy. Bonds have obviously super outperformed relative to equities. The ETFs they bought may be hurting. Understanding where traditional markets are at right now, obviously depending on the makeup of those ETFs. But they sold it, somewhere around 9-10K. It was a good sell by Tezos. So some interesting updates there. The majority of the grants have been focused on smart contract languages and other kind of baseline protocol improvements for Tezos. You don't see a ton of kind of gaming investments or specific niche investments. They're the foundation seems to be focusing on, kind of broader needs from an infrastructure standpoint, if you will, for the protocol itself, versus on very specific, dApps or games or other niches within that community. So they seem to be trucking along.
Yeah, Tezos seems to be the darling of crypto right now. You kind of hear a lot of people talk about how it's kind of undervalued at this point. So I'm interested to see in like the Tezos ecosystem kind of being built out. So basically, they're taking the approach of they're funding their own protocol not through dApps but from an infrastructure play, is what you're talking about.
At least to start, right?
Okay.
I think one of the big complaints whenever Tezos was launched was that they didn't have a lot of the same smart contract functionality that ETH or a lot of other blockchains start with, where obviously that is, I would say, where a majority of developers live. They want to design things for the end user. Like layer 2 is needed, interoperability is needed, but it's not super sexy. So I think they kind of realized that from the jump, and maybe in an effort to get the protocol out and launched, and because their focus has been on that self-amending protocol versus anything else, maybe their internal phase 1 has been on other infrastructure improvements. Voting and governance, has been a big focus from their grants too. They want to make that easier for folks who own Tezos. So yeah, like you said, they're the darling. They seem to be doing a lot right. They haven't had a ton of issues other than some of the settlements that they've gone through, and obviously the chaos they had from the ICO. But they continue to truck along. So, Deem, what's going on with this? on kind of on the other side of the coin, the opposite of the darling with Ripple.
Yeah, so in our continued series of class action lawsuits against Ripple, the new one that came out just recently was against the CEO, Brad Garlinghouse.
Garlinghouse, yeah.
Garlinghouse, yeah. Man, this guy was just like, I feel like everybody knew that was happening, but now people are actually taking like action. So basically this guy, like I think he tweeted out and he was posting promoting XRP and saying how he's gonna keep it for a long term, blah blah blah, he's gonna hodl it basically. Meanwhile, in the background, he was just dumping. And it's funny because he was dumping it. Once he dumped his stash, he also was getting paid some XRP later on, and he continued to dump it right away as soon as he gets his hands on it. So he was just continually, dumping XRP, and his reaction to this class action lawsuit and overall what's happening with Ripple and XRP investors is that, hey, Ripple and XRP are two different things. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no relation. It's not XRP is not shares of Ripple or any sort of that. There's no relationship there. So I don't know. It just continues to happen. For Ripple, they're still going to continue to struggle with what happened with XRP and the relationship there and how they carried it out. So
yeah, it's like a monkey on their back at this point. I mean, everybody in the crypto community has known that Ripple's been dumping tokens for a long time, and to me, this seems like the first, and hopefully not the last time that they're going to have to start to see some consequences from doing that.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to wait and see when that's gonna happen, because that has been around for a while, and we haven't really seen any type of settlements or whatnot. But I would be surprised. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if they do a settlement, just like everybody else does it in this industry. So yeah, moving right along. So I guess the last thing that we got here is Binance. Just some really quick news here. Binance CZ said, Hive is gonna move forward with getting listed and everything. So that we were talking about that season assist, right? I think that's what was happening there. And Binance said basically they don't really care about that. Hive is moving forward. Really, not much other than that. Just them not caring about the legal repercussions
Right.
surrounding.
Because this was your article, I wanted to hear kind of like what you thought about it. But like from the cease and desist, they sent it to the company Hive. Are we talking about the company that made the Hive network? They wanted to change. I'm kind of confused as to what company this cease and desist is
so
going
the
to.
Steam,
Yeah, go ahead.
remember we talked about last week, right? Steam obviously, merged over to Hive,
Yep.
and there was some other Hive crypto company, maybe mining, I think, in Canada, sent the cease and desist. The Hive community, right? The decentralized community, the new Steam, Hive community is like, screw you. We don't have a CEO. We're decentralized.
Okay.
But CZ has distributed Hive, these new Hive tokens to, I think, via a Steam airdrop potentially, to users, and basically said screw you to the cease and desist. So obviously Binance is a company, right? They do have a CEO who is CZ. He doesn't seem to care. And to me is more of like a slap in the face to Justin Sun than anything else. I think this might be CZ getting back and saying, hey, you know what, man, you didn't give me all the details of this. You did some shady shit. You involved me in this. You're hurting my name. I've got all sorts of other issues going on already. So you know what? I'm going to distribute these tokens anyway.
So it was the initial Hive, not the Steam network Hive, that sent the cease and desist to Binance. That's what I didn't get that. I thought it was the Steam community Hive that was sending the cease and desist over.
Gotcha. No. Yeah. And they sent the cease and desist just kind of, I don't know who they sent it to, right? Like, did they just like post it in a Telegram chat? Like,
well, no. So the company Hive sent the cease and desist to Binance.
No. The company Hive, the mining company, or the more longer standing company Hive in crypto.
Dimitri, I need to hear this, dude.
Sent it to. They didn't send it to Binance. They sent it to the new Hive company.
Right.
That came from Steam. Does that make sense?
Got it.
So the article is kind of confusing because it says Binance ignored the cease and desist, even though they didn't receive it. So it's kind of clickbaity there.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But the point is that
I'm out.
Yeah. The point is that in regards to just the tokens being airdropped, even though this thing is still, active in terms of, active being sued and so on. Right. So that can tie in, other entities that help out, expanding this,
right.
Heartwood, it shouldn't be expanding because of the stipulation there with the legal side of it.
Yeah, so if CZ hasn't got a cease and desist, he's definitely going to after distributing all of those tokens.
They're having some big issues in terms of PR lately. They're delisting some of the FTX tokens. So it's like bulls and bears and so on. They're like pretty interesting derivatives, but a lot of people are upset about that, and that blew up on Twitter.
Yep.
So they're having some tough times right now.
Yeah, for sure. Like we've said many times before, CZ was kind of the Jesus figure within crypto for a long time, and now over the last, what's it been, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, something like that. It's just while they're expanding and they're doing all these things, and they got these debit cards, they can't seem to catch a break within the ultra community driven crypto industry, if you will, and specifically with the FTX tokens, they obviously launched their futures exchange, right? They expanded who's able to access their general margin, and kind of the margin exchange that they use. And FTX saw these weird hybrid derivatives called their like bull and bear tokens for specific crypto assets like BTC bull or ETH bull, ETH bear, BTC bear. FTX has grown in a lot of ways because of these derivatives. So Binance tried to launch them. And the problem is when you get these weird hybrid derivatives, and you don't do a good job of educating people, or if people don't educate themselves on how they actually work and how, value is derived, to the underlying derivative, you get people who think like, oh, this is just, me going 3x long on, ETH bull at $100. And then when it goes to, whatever price and ETH bull goes down, they're like, well, wait a minute, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like I thought I was getting exposure to ETH, but no, instead you're getting exposure to this super weird, kind of hybrid derivative that Binance isn't obviously explaining well enough. So yeah, they were like,
we have something like similar like that in traditional finance with ETFs, where it's like you'll have like a leveraged ETF on S&P and other products that they don't track it 100%, and there is going to be that spread there. So yeah, it was a disaster.
yeah, for sure.
CZ seems to be suffering from like a Trump effect now, man. It seems like where he can't like kind of like get out of his own way a little bit. That makes sense. Like Binance would be fine. Like Binance did not have the rise it did, although CZ definitely helped. Binance did not have the rise it did because of CZ, unlike Justin Sun, where Justin Sun is acting like this all the time, and that's why physically Tron is where it is today, whereas CZ seems to like be getting in his own way and not needing to, whereas Justin Sun consistently needs to be in the news because that's the brand that is Tron, like at least to this point. And we'll see what happens, man. CZ, CZ, I think you made a good point there, Dima. Like he is consistently finding himself on the wrong side of the news these days.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was another good one. We've been streaming this one live here for about 2 hours on YouTube. For those of you listening after the fact, we're sitting at about $6,400 Bitcoin. So nice little push up.
A $20 oil barrel.
$20 oil. My goodness.
Yep.
Yeah. So who knows where we're at by the time you're listening to this. But as always, we're hitting these on Monday, keeping you guys up to date on all of the news. If you want to interact, hit us up in Telegram, t.me/Sutler Ventures, or obviously hop into YouTube when we're doing this live.
Yeah, we appreciate all the comments. I'll go through them real quick. Kieran, Scott's in the chat, Prodigy, Mike Finch in that chat. Who else do we have? Dimitri's been in the chat. Andre's been in the chat. We had a ton of people comment this week, so we appreciate everybody making these days a little bit better with this quarantine and COVID and everything wrong that's going on in the world. At least there's some right with Layer1Live. So, and Kieran also says, I'm bullish on bears, which I think is like the funniest comment I've heard. All right, guys.
I like that.
Anything else before we sign off, fellas?
I don't think so. We got Orchid, really interesting crypto VPN project. And then, like you said, Maple Leaf Cap, which if you come to Layer1Live, any of kind of the conglomerate here, and you're looking, for really what's going on behind the scenes in crypto, Maple Leaf is, somebody who can definitely get there. So 2 awesome interviews coming at some point this week or next to your phones, ready for your listening pleasure.
All right, guys.
Boom, boom.